I think I may have a stationery problem. So today I'm going to be talking about my new personal knowledge management system. I've done a video on this before, but I've actually shifted it up a little bit, and all of this stationery here in this new writing bureau behind me is all an effort to try and bring about a new, I guess, rejuvenation of that personal knowledge management system. I'm going pretty much entirely analog. I'm still going to use some digital tools. We'll talk about that in a minute. And in this video, I'm going to give you 5, maybe 6 reasons why I'm shifting to using this big A3 notepad as my new personal knowledge management system. So it's no secret that I am actually a stationery freak. I do co-host a podcast called Stationery Freaks at stationeryfreaks.com if you're interested. The last video I did on personal knowledge management systems got quite a lot of hits, actually. One of my most successful videos to date. And it was a good video. I explained why I do it, the capture, curate, crunch, contribute model, which I'm not going to go over here. If you're interested, there'll be a link in the show notes. But I'm going to give you some reasons why I've decided to move to a predominantly analog method of learning. Also, why I've invested in this 1900s-ish writing bureau, and why this is going to become my go-to place. It's one of the 6 reasons. Now, I'm not going to jump into the whole capture, curate, crunch, and contribute model that I use. That's all covered in the previous video, and that still remains. Still the same principle. But I'm going to give you 5 or 6 different reasons why I'm going to start using these notebooks and put them to some good use. So reason number 1 was I was finding myself completely and utterly distracted by digital tools. There's a very famous communication lecturer, I think, a guy called Clay Shirky, who found that when he banned laptops in his class, his grades went up for his students. And there's a number of reasons for that. Obviously, you're not distracted by Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is that you're doing online. But more importantly is when you have digital tools, you're able to basically transcribe everything that's been said. When you get away from that and you go back to pen and paper, you have to think about things and put them into your own words because you can't capture everything that everybody's saying. Now, if we think about this in the digital world, what I was finding myself doing was just capturing every web page possible, every nugget of information, this. My Evernote or Nimbus Note, as I'm now using, is just full of stuff off the internet because it's so easy to capture everything. Now, of course, I could whittle that down, and that's the curate process. But actually what I found myself doing is reverting back to just a few core sources of information, new books every so often, and new web pages, new blogs, but not that many. So what I'm trying to do is get to the point where I'm not just capturing stuff because it's so easy, and instead I'm making it a little bit more harder to do that, a little bit more friction, because with that friction comes a little bit more reward for me personally. Reason number 2 is technology is extremely efficient, but I didn't find it particularly effective. Now, I'm a big fan, and you hear me talk about this on the channel a lot, of becoming effective first, then efficient. There's no point making something ineffective more efficient. And what was happening was computers were enabling me to be super fast, super efficient. But what I found was I personally was not changing. I mean, that's the goal of learning, is for me to become better, to behave in different ways, to use those things that I'm learning and be able to bring about change in business, myself, my family, my life. And I found that I wasn't doing that. I was basically becoming very efficient at capturing information, logging it, storing it. Taxonomy was awesome, and I could retrieve it like that. But I wasn't changing. I wasn't putting it into action because I was just going too fast. I was capturing too much stuff. It's all about slowing down and turning that information into action, which turns it into knowledge. That leads nicely on to number 3, which is essentially putting it into action. I believe it was Francis Bacon that said it's better to indulge in just a few good books rather than read everything that is out there. And And again, tied to point number 2, this is about slowing down. It's about picking 1 or 2 things, maybe a good couple of books or a good couple of online resources, and really digesting and breaking it down and seeing those logical connections which I can get when I do the mind maps in this big A3 planner. So that's really what I'm trying to aim at, is slow down, really deeply digest the book, like literally line for line, page by page, map it out, draw things from it, draw conclusions and connections and assimilations across all the other stuff that I've captured over my lifetime, and to put that into action, to try small things so that I become better every day. So idea number 4 comes from, I think it's an old tagline by Field Notes, the brand who make little notebooks, very similar to these actually. I've got a couple of Field Notes somewhere. And their tagline was, I'm not writing it down to remember it in the future, I'm writing it down to remember it now. Now, tied back to point number 1 about Clay Shirky, this is writing to remember it now. It's digesting it. It's interpreting what you're hearing and seeing into your own words, putting it down on paper in your own vocabulary, your own way of thinking, the system that makes sense for you. You have to translate it. You have to think about it. And you can challenge it, disagree with it. And here's why, because I've got this piece of information, or I've seen it work differently in other ways. Tied with this is this, for me anyway, this memory. So I don't know whether obviously you've been shopping to the grocery store, hopefully, at some point in your life. And when I write a shopping list out, I can probably get around the whole of the store and I might miss 1 or 2 things that I've written out. If I take a list that's been written by somebody else, I can read it 3,000 times before I go in the shop, and I'll still miss things. So for me, writing is a very, very powerful aid to my memory. And I think there's some science out there suggests anywhere up to 3 to 4 times more retention when you write something than if you just transcribe or use digital tools. So for me, that's part of this process as well. Writing stuff down to remember it now, not necessarily for the future. So idea number 5 is just because I love stationery. I like buying new notebooks, I like new pens, I like the way they feel and the drag across the page and the different GSMs of paper. Proper geeky stuff, and hence the reason I'm a co-host on a stationery podcast. Of all things, would you have imagined that would have found an audience? But it did. And the reason is because stationery has this very tactile essence to it. You can feel it, you can touch it, you can sort of get a feel for whether or not the notebook and the pen is the right combination. It sounds ridiculous, but to people like me, this is important. I like the potential that stationery can unleash. A new notebook offers so much potential that is usually squandered by me, I'll be honest, and I pretty much usually ruin it with my terrible handwriting on the first page. But there's just something captivating, something tactile. And I think for me, what's important as well is there's an end to this. So when I'm using Nimbus Notes or Evernote or any, Xmind mind mapping software, there's literally no end to it. You could just keep adding stuff to it. I'm sure you'd hit some sort of blocker or some sort of upper limit at some point. But with stationery, there's a kind of end to it. The A3 page, there's a finite amount of space that I have in here to do a mind map or map out a topic or explore an idea. With a notebook, there's only so much I can put into this. I'm using this brown thing here as my planner and my sort of journal. There's only so much room in here, and it gets you to, I guess, have those constraints that lead to great creativity and allow you to sort of stick within those confines that are, physically in these notebooks. And for me, the A3 is just perfect size. It's not too small. I've got a fair amount of real estate in here. It's plain paper, so I can doodle, draw, do mind maps, and within this I can explore an idea. And of course I'm going to run out of room at some point, and I have to come up with some sort of logical way of indexing it and mapping it and moving from topic to topic. But for me, this is the constraint that I need so that I'm not just capturing everything. I'm not just trying to consume so much that I'm overwhelmed and unable to put any of it into action. And I just love good stationery. And then idea number 6 is, because I want to try and get away from digital tools, I'm lucky enough to have this studio, and I'm very blessed and very grateful for that. And that's what this writing bureau is designed for. It's kind of like an environmental affordance that says, when I'm here, I'm doing these kind of work and this kind of work. That was really bad English, wasn't it? And for me, that's really important. So I've started to write books in notepads, on yellow legal pads actually here. I've got loads of them. I'm starting to write some of my blog posts and newsletters in notebooks. And of course, I'm journaling and planning away from the computer, which is super important. And so when I sit here at this desk, that's what I do. I don't sit here with a laptop. I don't sit here with my phone. I don't sit here and do anything that isn't some form of creativity or learning. And I think having that sort of routine, habit, and dedicated space, even if it's a tiny corner on the kitchen worktop or a tiny part of your home studio or your bedroom, just having somewhere where you can say, when I go there, I do this kind of work, is a really, really good reinforcing mechanism to get stuff done and to achieve those things that you're trying to achieve. So for me, that's why I've gone to pen and paper. The learning management system still stands. I still capture stuff digitally. I still curate that. And then of course I blend it with proper books, real physical books, my own observations, which I capture in these little red and black notebooks, or black and red notebooks as they're called. And then I crunch it and then I contribute it. And that's all done through this pen and paper system. Anyway, I hope that's been somewhat entertaining at least, if not insightful and useful. This system's working for now, and no doubt maybe 6 months time to a year there'll be another system. But I'm very happy at the moment. And I'm very happy that when I come to this desk here, I sit down and I do this kind of work, and that's a very powerful motivator. Let me know in the comments whether you've got a similar system, whether you have a dedicated place that you go to. And of course, there's a link to the other personal knowledge management system video where I explain the capture, curate, crunch, and contribute model in more depth. Look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care.